Chapter 19. The Furies. Gabriella hugged Damien to her as each statue jumped into pose of readiness, their stone limbs sliding and grinding with the noise of millstones crushing chaff. The Furies rolled their necks and twisted their hands and feet like wrestlers, shaking away stiffness before a match. Gabriella noticed with alarm how each Fury wiggled its fingers. Did they realize they were missing something? The stones weighed heavily in her pocket. She pressed herself back against Adamantus. Gabrielle was afraid they would turn their blank, accusing eyes on her, but the Furies took no notice of the three of them sprawled on the floor. Instead, the demons were distracted by Garmer, who stumbled across the alcove as any dog that had just been blinded might. The dog touched its face with its paws, whimpered, and knocked up against the legs of those around him. Gabriella felt a stab of sympathy for him, as she would for any creature who had been maimed. Still, none of the Furies moved out of the alcove. Their attention was focused on Phallic, who stood taller than all of them, a commander among his troops. He flexed his hood. For a fleeting moment, Gabriella felt the weight of his gaze before he turned its snake face to Sybil and Libis. "Hear me, O creatures of stone! We are your masters. You are our slaves. You will obey every command of mine," Sybil said. "Of ours," Libis was quick to add. The other Furies, Lepus, Alcaron, and Katab, looked to Phallic, who closed his hood like a peacock, folding his tail and knelt down before Sybil. The others copied, kneeling down beside him. Garmer, in the meantime, stumbled against the wall, sniffing the ground. The dog growled, then lunged for Lepus. Lepus, who had the head of a wolf, a spiny back like a porcupine, and arms like a man, tried to escape, but Garmer was too quick. He caught Lepus's horse leg in his mouth and swung him against the wall. Brick shattered, stone ground against stone, as Lepus struggled against Garmer's rows of teeth. Hearing the clamor, the wyvern struck more forcefully back at the dome. Dust came down in sheets. Treasure filled from the shelves, and the bricks trembled under their feet. Phallic shot across the alcove and struck a withering blow to Garmer, who fell aside, cowering. Phallic beat the dog again until it was crouching in the corner. Its howls diminished to whimpers. Garmer began to crack. It seemed as if Phallic would not stop until Garmer was reduced to rubble, but Sybil shouted, "Enough!" Phallic's fist stilled, poised in the air ready for more strike. Garmer limped out of the alcove and back between two bookcases, his mouth fixed in a frown, his head drooping. Phallic turned to his mistress with a slow, calculated loyalty. Gabriella sensed no coercion there, no blind obedience, only a choice for as long as it suited him. "Let us find Sir Mortimer," Sybil said, "and present to him our newest servants." They traveled in single file to the other end of the chamber. Sybil and Libis led them, their backs turned to their train of slaves. Gabriella, Adamantus, and Damien followed. Adamantus still limped and occasionally staggered. Gabriella and Damien walked on either side to support him. The Furies brought up the rear. Gabriella did not like turning her back on the vile creatures. Alcaron, with his spider head, the fangs working constantly, was just behind her, sidling along on crab legs. Lepus followed next with his snarling wolf face, and Katab, whose head was that of a boar, came after. Katab restrained Garmer with his massive manus claw. Phallic marched last. Mortimer, deep between the rows of shells, had spilled the ransoms of many kings already. "What is going on here?" he said, staring at the Furies and Garmer. "I brought them to life to carry treasure for us," Sybil said. "Gabriella here found a door that leads to your ship." "They are hideous," he said, sneering at the statues. Gabriella wondered if he remembered the fable about them, but he did not seem to. "They listen to you?" "Of course, all my slaves do." Sybil turned to the statues. "Slaves, pick up the treasure, put it back in the boxes, and carry the boxes to the ship outside." The Furies obeyed. Garmer strayed out of line, towards Gabriella, his nose sniffing in the air. She felt her skin flush. If he could smell the Furies, could he detect the gem eyes in her pockets? The scent must have grown stronger, for the dog clambered towards Gabriella, his nostrils wide, his tail wagging. Adamantus casually stepped in the way, but there was no need. Katab yanked Garmer by his collar and placed a full box of treasure on his broad back. The dog gave a soft whine. "Extraordinary," Mortimer said, watching Catapio Garmer. Sybil ordered the statues to fill the Elan. As Gabriella watched the Furies work, Libis turned to her. Move! You're a slave too. Gabriella picked up the spilled treasure and dumped it back into chest. Her hands could not contain as much as the white hands and claws of the Furies. Adamantus came up beside her and told her to place a bag of coins on his back. You are still injured. You need to rest. I am not letting you carry treasure outside with these creatures alone. She smiled her gratitude at the elk as Mortimer walked over to Alcaron. The statue was moving with mindless efficiency, but one of his 8 spider eyes was fixed on the trapper. Where did you find these things? He asked. They were in an alcove in the wall, Sybil said. Are there other alcoves? Alcaron nodded. Brilliant. It heard me, Mortimer said. If these things have been here long enough, perhaps they can tell us where the eyes of Garmer are. Garmer lifted his head, hearing Mortimer speak his name, but Katab pulled the dog towards the door. Gabriella dropped the coins she was collecting. What are the eyes of Garmer? Libis asked. They are gems worth more than all the gold here, Mortimer said. Adamantus told me about them. Is that what you were looking for now, turning over all these boxes? Sybil asked. Yes, Elk. You have no idea where they might be. I imagine they could be anywhere in this chamber. Well, perhaps the statues know, Mortimer said. He kicked Lepus. Hey, you know where the eyes of Garmer are. He yelled close to the statue's ear. Gabriella stood ready to grab her brother and run, but Lepus kept scooping treasure up in his hands and filling boxes. Mortimer shrugged. Maybe they don't know. Maybe the stones are just legend, Libis suggested. She turned to Phallic. You, Snakehead, can you show us where there are more jewels? Phallic nodded and began to walk down the row. The girls followed, squealing. Mortimer grumbled something unintelligible under his breath and spilled out another chest of treasure onto the floor. Gabriella clutched her sides with her arms folded across her chest. When Libis asked where more jewels were, the Furies led her to them. When Mortimer asked about the eyes, they played dumb. It did not take a genius to see the game the statues were playing and what they were trying to protect. For themselves. She wished she had not taken the gems, and yet she could not help thinking of Nickermedes and her feeling that she was meant to take them, for whatever reason. She brushed her pocket just to check if the stones were still there. The other 3 Furies, with chests on their shoulders, steered the laden Garmer towards the door. Adamantus gestured for Gabriella and Damien to follow. They did, struggling to carry a heavy chest between them. Not so fast, Gabriella, Mortimer said. Damien stays here with me. We don't want you getting any ideas about flying off without us. The hopes that had risen in Gabriella's breast died as she watched Mortimer pull Damien over to his side. Separated from his sister, Damien began to moan. Mortimer patted him on the head, but had clearly forgotten what Gabriella had told him about Damien's idiosyncrasies. Her brother lunged at him, beating against the trapper's chest. Exasperated, Mortimer shoved Damien aside and turned back to his search, leaving her brother to whimper and rock. Outside, the statues descended the hill in looping strides, showing no sign that they were afraid of the drop at the bottom. Gabriella and Adamantus, by contrast, moved with tiny steps, keeping close to the mountainside and out of the mother dragon's sight. By the time they reached the Elan, the statues had already deposited their loads and were climbing the hill back to the treasure chamber. Gabriella and the elk gave the Furies a wide berth. When she and Adamantus dropped their loads on the Elan, boards groaned under the added weight of the treasure. The ship can't hold this much weight, and they are already coming back with more, she said as the Furies returned. She and Adamantus stopped on the cliff ledge to rest. Neither said a word, but Gabriella knew they were both thinking of ways to escape. Between a gap in the rocks, she could see the wyvern shape moving across the dome, an angry giant wasp. As long as they were outside and so close, they were in danger. If Mortimer keeps Damien, Gabriella said, then we just need to get both of them back to the ship. We will be stuck with Mortimer on the return trip, but it is better than staying here. The statues were growing smaller as they trudged up the hill. Under her breath, she added, we can entice Mortimer to leave with the eyes. You are right. He wants them more than anything. Yes, but I had not counted on the monsters we would have to take from them. Those statues are dangerous, Adamantus said, still breathless from the exertion of carrying the treasure. I think the price of the eyes just went up. We shouldn't stay out here where the wyvern might see us. They both got up, leaning on one another. Gabriella had trouble mustering the strength to climb the steep hill. Adamantus helped her up, pulling her collar in his teeth. On a whim, she peered around the ledge to check the doors on the front of the mountain. They were hanging open. What was left of them was twisted and melted. With fire and force, the mother had done her damage. Just as they turned, 3 Furies were stowing another load on the port side of the ship. With a loud snap, the deck below Lipa splintered, and the Fury sank through the boards as if he were on quicksand. Lipa shot right through the hole. The statue raised his hands to grab hold of any piece of the ship as he fell, but it was no use. His weight and momentum were too great. He fell down the cliff face, his mouth open in a silent howl. When he struck the bottom, he exploded in a cloud of white dust, his pieces continuing to tumble out to all sides until they disappeared in the purple heather. Gabriella and Adamantus looked over from the cliff edge just as Alcaron and Katab turned their faces up from the hole in the Elan. For a tense moment, they all stared in silence before the statues went to work again. "The Furies will load her until she collapses," Gabriella said. "That might be their intention. We need to get Mortimer and Damien out." They climbed the hill, following the statues at a safe distance. In the treasure room, Katab and Alcaron again burdened Garmer with riches. Damien was where they had left him, sitting and rocking, his head under his arms. He stopped when Gabriella reappeared and moved to press himself against Adamantus, grabbing his fur the way a child would hold a favorite blanket. Mortimer sorted through another mess of coins he had spilled upon the floor. When he did not find what he was seeking, he cursed loudly. "Mr. Creetley," Gabriella said, once the Furies and Garmer were on their way to the door. "A new hole just opened in the deck of the Elan. Some of the treasure might be too heavy." "Too heavy?" "Well, the way the statues are placing it. I think they need to be supervised." He looked at her, suspicion on his face. "Adamantus and I saw it. One of them dropped right through and shattered on the rocks. Did you notice one of them was missing?" "Actually, I noticed you took your time coming back." She became exasperated and lied quickly. "Because I was trying to get them to stop loading the port deck. They would not listen to me. They might listen to you. The Elan is no good to us if she collapses." "She speaks the truth, Mortimer," Adamantus said. "Take Damien with you," Gabriella said with the air of one making a painful concession. "I'll stay here and gather up these coins." Mortimer yanked Damien by the hand and led him outside. Gabriella exchanged a look with Adamantus. She would let her brother and Mortimer reach a certain distance. Then they would follow. Once outside, she might use the jewels in her pocket to convince Mortimer to leave with them, although she knew it would be hard for him to part from his new friends, the princesses and their wands. She made a show of picking up coins and replacing them in boxes before she and Adamantus started for the door. They were halfway across the chamber when Sybil stopped them. "Where are you going?" Sybil said, stepping out from around a shelf. "To the Elan," Gabriella said, "to tell Mortimer something." "To tell him what?" "That the port side of the Elan is so weak from all the treasure, it might collapse." Sybil stared at her for a moment. "Why are you not carrying a box with you or the elk?" "Because I just remembered this, and—" It was too late. Sybil blasted her with a searing flash of white light. Gabriella fell to the floor. The room spun. "You lie! You and your pet elk here, you lie!" Gabriella was shaking. This blast had been more controlled than the others, but the pain had been more intense, as if the wand's power grew with Sybil's rage. Red welts rose on Gabriella's skin. She pushed the hair out of her eyes. Her forehead was slick and cold with sweat. She knew she had to lie better if she was to survive. Then it occurred to her that perhaps she would not. Perhaps she could just give up. It took too much effort to fight any longer. She fell forward and reached into her pocket to find the stones and hand them over. She would do anything not to feel any more pain. But she reached into the wrong pocket. This one held something that felt like a leaf and twig. Her fingers curled around it, and she remembered just what it was. The last living twig from the blue tree. The last leaf Gade had climbed up the tree to pick. And her last token of him. As it had in the privy on Foyle Island, touching the twig gave her strength, and her resolve returned. She double-checked which hand the princess was using to hold her wand. It took her a moment to focus, but Gabriella was sure she used her right, not the left. It was definitely Sybil. Gabriella did her best imitation of impatience. She leaned back against the wall, shaking her head and rolling her shoulders, her palms up. "What are you waiting for? What happened to our deal, Libis?" Gabriella whispered, looking over Sybil's shoulder. "What deal?" "When your sister was unconscious. After the first blast from my mirror at Foyle Castle." It was difficult for Gabriella to get the words out, for she was breathless. She was aware, though, that the other Furies would be on their way back soon, along with Damien and Mortimer. She had to do this before they returned. "When my sister was unconscious?" Sybil asked. "Yes, Libis. When Sybil was unconscious and we made our agreement to come here, leave her here and return." Gabriella suddenly stopped, making a show of widening her eyes and staring at the wand in Sybil's right hand. "I'm sorry, Sybil. What I was saying, I was a bit confused." Another blast of searing pain. Gabriella nearly lost consciousness, but she held the image of Gayday clambering through tree branches in her mind, the look of hope on his face. The pain stopped quickly this time, for Sybil wanted her to speak. The wand was jabbed into Gabriella's throat now. "Speak, before I destroy you," she said in a whisper. Or perhaps I should kill your elk friend." "No, no, I'm sorry. Please, no more," Gabriella pleaded. "Please, Sybil, I thought you were Libis. She means you no harm. She is loyal to you. She would not kill you when she first materialized, and you were still unconscious, although I begged her to. She recognized you as her sister, but I told her how dangerous and powerful you were. We made an arrangement. You two could follow us here. We would use your wands in the maze for protection. Then we would leave you here where you could have the treasure. She would leave with me. You see, Sybil, Libis truly is your opposite. It is not that she just holds her wand in the opposite hand. No, she wants to grow up. She wants to be a queen. She wants to have her own children. She wants to grow old." Sybil clenched her jaw for some time before a scream bubbled up from deep in her throat. She struck at Gabriella's face repeatedly. Adamantus moved between them. Sybil screamed again and began slapping the tears from her own face, then turned and ran in the direction of her sister, cursing through her teeth. Adamantus helped Gabriella up. A trick the trickster and Gayday would have admired. Gabriella secured the tree spike in her pocket. "Let's hope it keeps them busy fighting." They found the sisters facing each other at the end of the row. Libis, hearing her sister's screams, had come running. A mass of clashing jewels glittered as her chest rose and fell. Phallic was behind her. Somewhere, Libis had found a crown which she wore upon her head. Nothing could have implicated her more. Sybil raised her wand. "Why are you wearing that crown?" Sybil asked, venom in her voice. "I like it. Where is mine?" "Back where the statue showed me this one. There is a king and a queen one. This is the queen one. Why are you wearing that one?" "Because I was going to let you have the king one because you like to be bossy." "Liar! You want to be queen without me." Libis was confused now. "Why are you acting this way?" Gabriella felt it was time for her to intervene. "Libis, I'm sorry. She tortured me. I told her. She knows everything." "Told her what?" "Told her about our plan, to leave her here." Gabriella felt a pang of guilt as a trap closed around Libis. She reminded herself that Libis was truly just another Sybil, an extension of the ruined princess, the same person who had killed Gayday. Gabriella noticed Phallic's face turn away from the princesses to look upon her and Adamantus. Her mouth went dry as ash. "What plan? She is making this up," Libis said, her brow furrowed. "Quiet! I hate you!" Sybil shouted. Libis, with a temper to match Sybil's own, retaliated. "I hate you! Why don't you believe me, you stupid?" "Don't call me stupid! I will destroy you!" Sybil yelled. A shaft of red light surged out from Sybil's wand and struck Libis. Phallic leapt out of the way with the agility of a grasshopper. He alighted atop one of the shelves. The red light threw Libis across the chamber into the wall, but it also reflected off her jewels. Beams rayed outward, striking treasure chests and exploding them open. Tiles on the floor splintered to dust. A fan of light radiated upward off Libis's crown and struck the dome. A fissure opened in the dome. Adamantus covered Gabriella with his body. An avalanche filled the chamber as bricks crashed down onto the floor. A cloud of dust bloomed upward from the debris. When Adamantus finally moved his weight off her, Gabriella saw that the chamber was a mess of fallen, translucent bricks. One that had lodged in Adamantus's antlers slid out and landed with a clack upon the floor. Phallic was digging himself out of the wreckage. Libis cowered against the wall. Her dress was singed black in parts. Her own skin was burned bright red, as if she had been in the sun too long. Her vengeful eyes focused on the collapsed form of her sister. Sybil had sought cover beneath a shelf. As she came crawling out, dazed, Libis raised her wand at her sister and fired. A bolt of green light sent Sybil sliding back along the floor into the shelves. Wood shattered and treasure spilled. As Sybil's body tumbled, her own skin turned green with oozing pustules. She vomited yellow bile before clawing her way across the tiled floor and returning Libis's blast with a stream of orange light that went wide and struck the wall, leaving a black crater. Libis raised her wand ready to retaliate when the chamber erupted in a roar. The ceiling dome was open. The sky was visible, pure and clear. Framing the face of the mother wyvern, her roar from that maw of razor teeth was a crushing sound. It was filled with all the fury of a wild beast, of vengeance about to be fulfilled, and most of all, a mother in mourning. The mother knew, Gabriella realized, that it had been Sybil and her sister who had caused her to drop the egg. Not the gift of speech, but the gift of understanding. The dragon's eyes were fixed on the princesses as she struck at the bricks with her talons and fought to enter through the gap in the dome. Libis took the distraction as an opportunity to fire again at her sister. A stream of violet light ribboned across the room and struck the floor beside Sybil. Sybil spun behind a shelf and began firing bolts of lightning. Adamantus pulled Gabriella to her feet. "Come, to the side door," the elk said as they clambered over the fallen bricks, auras of light from the sisters' wands flying overhead. The mother wyvern struck the dome with all her power now, tail thrashing and limbs pounding at the structure. The entire floor shook, and the glass bricks piled on the floor trembled. Splits ran down the chamber walls. The entire facade of the treasure house swayed back and forth. Glass shattered and fell in a glittering rain from the windows. A lantern clanged on the floor. Gabriella and Adamantus tripped and slid over the mess at their feet as they ran. The door was not far. Daylight from outside formed a perfect beam in the dusty air. Gabriella made reaching that light her goal. She stretched her hand out for Adamantus and pulled him along after her. Figures appeared in the door. "No, Damien, go back!" Gabriella yelled. But it was not her brother. The Furies, Alcaron and Katab, stopped in the doorway, Garmur twisting to get away. The stone faces of the Furies scanned back and forth before their gaze stopped on Gabriella. Alcaron reached out a stony hand for the iron crank and turned it. Gabriella watched their escape close with a few twists. The beaming of daylight narrowed into a wedge, a slice, and then was gone. Gabriella heard the sound of stones clacking against stones behind her. She turned, keeping her back against Adamantus. Phallic waited, his hood spread wide. His own master.